What's going on, guys? Aaron here, Curls in the Rack, back again with another DIY video. And yes, there have been a lot of DIY videos lately, but I think I'm finally finished with making all the attachments that I want to make to get the most out of my lever arm now that I have the Vendetta brackets here, and I will get to the full review on those, which will be very robust now that I have all these accessories and everything I think I want the way I want it. So anyways, I originally decided to make this bench because I wanted to have a decline bench. I had the foot rollers that I made over here that I can use with the GHD pad and everything like that, but I thought, well, you know what, if I had a bench pad, I could actually have a decline bench. Now, getting up into position with super heavy weight, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do that out here with them being set up somewhere out here, but that is besides the point. I will figure that out later. It works pretty well, but it also can be used for a ton of other stuff. So why don't I go ahead and showcase that now, and you can decide if you want to make it, and we'll roll the footage on how I made this thing. Got an idea of how multifunctional and how many uses you can get out of this thing, and that it actually is very easy to adjust and works really well. Let me go ahead and show you what materials you might need and give you some other options if you can't find these materials. First of all, this bench pad right here. This is off an AB 3000 bench. Now, I got this thing off of OfferUp for 20 bucks. Somebody was selling it. I grabbed it. I didn't want to really have to make a bench pad if I can spend $20 to find a pad that's already put together. But you can always check out my other video on where I make a lat pull down seat for either my slinger or for the Titan Fitness, and take the concept of me making the seat for that with wood, vinyl, and foam, and then staples, and make yourself a bench. So if you don't have this part, you can't find this part, consider just making one out of wood. It's not that difficult. The other stuff that I sourced was, this is the Titan Fitness lever arm bracket, the old one. So for example, if you were to get the Vendetta Strength brackets, you no longer need that piece. And if you don't need that piece, you can hack it up like I'm going to show you how to do in the video, and you can use it for something else. I'm also going to use the other one and make a DIY foot roller out of it, but I'll do that later. Don't worry. So anyways, the rest of the material is just some stuff that I sourced locally from a metal depot, metal supermarkets, I believe, in Portland. So give them a shout out. And that is all of it. In fact, all this metal here, it only cost like maybe 15 bucks or something like that. So it's a fairly inexpensive way to use what you already have and make something really cool and useful. Also, please don't think that this thing can only be used on a lever arm. Think about what you have that's 3x3 tubing that this thing can go on as well. Like for instance, a cross member. If you don't have a hip thruster pad, like from Rogue Fitness, you could actually use this, put it on a cross member in the middle of your rack, and you would essentially have a hip thruster pad. So just keep that in mind. Any 3x3, doesn't necessarily have to be a trolley arm, you could use this thing with. And so now let's go ahead and get to the footage. I will go ahead and voice over when I think it's something worth noting, and then we'll meet back here at the end. Let's roll. Okay guys, so the first step and the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to be cutting up this bracket. Now this is probably gonna be the lengthiest part of the whole process, just because you wanna make sure that when you're cutting it, you don't cut into the bracket at all, and we're just trying to separate these two brackets that have been welded together. So I'm trying to just hit that weld and go right into that groove, so that way I can pry it off on both sides and have both of the brackets still intact and not have to do as much smoothing out and do any damage essentially to the bracket. So just be careful when you're doing this part and just try to hit that weld. And the next step after you get it all removed is you're gonna have some leftover metal on there. So it's just to go ahead and grind this guy down. You can use a grinding disc, you can use a sanding disc, or a tiger's paw as they call it, to do this. But I recommend the grinder just because there's probably gonna be a lot of extra metal on there. So we wanna remove that, make sure it's flat, and then go to the next step. And the next step, because the pin that we want to use to go through our bracket portion is welded to the back side. So we're not going to be using the back side. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cut off this thing, and we are essentially going to be welding it to our other bracket, which already has a hole in it. So I'll show you that step in a sec. Okay, so as you can see, I used an extra piece of 3x3 tubing. I put the pin straight through the top and made sure that it went through the 3x3 tubing, and then I clamped it on there so it would stay in place while I welded the top portion. That way you make sure that it is straight, and that when we remove it after welding it, it's going to go back through another 3x3 straight. Next, I just went ahead and flushed this up, not removing too much of the weld because we don't want that pin protruding out of the top. We want a nice flat top on it for welding to our bracket. And the next step is to take some measurements on the bench to see what size we want for our brackets. We want to go as far as we can, but we also don't want to go over the edges of the bench pad underneath. And so I found that 10 inches worked well. For the top part, I actually made a mistake and did them both at 10, and then I just cut 2 inches off after that because it sort of bows in at the top where the head portion is, so easy adjustment. Next, I went ahead and used my metal chop saw, which has been the best purchase I've made this year as far as making stuff. Saves a lot of time not having to use an angle grinder and cut these things. And it also makes it so it's much more precise. And next, I went ahead and I lined up where the holes were going to be. So I went right to the center of the 2 bolts and made a mark. And then I did lines all the way across. And I went ahead and I measured halfway between the bracket, and that is where I did my mark. So that way I knew where to drill my holes, and they are 3/8 inch bolts. And so then I just used my drill press and went ahead and made my holes. And after I went ahead and finished my holes and made sure they actually lined up with the bolts, I went ahead and made sure that it was centered. And then I drew on the outside of exactly where I wanted to weld. So that way I could take it outside, clamp it, line it back up on those spots, and get it on there straight. And after I got it welded on the one side, I did 2 more welds on the bottom portion of it, just to give it added stability. Then I went ahead and I took my flapper, tiger paw, sanding disc, whatever you want to call it, and I went ahead and make sure it was as flat and flush as possible, so that way there was no bow on the bracket. And I went ahead and I did 3 little starter welds, and then I finished it off by welding the rest of it. Next, I went ahead and I cleaned up any kind of rough edges. I didn't want anything sharp on there, so I rounded the edges on all the brackets, and then it was pretty much done. I mean, you can paint it if you want to, but I just went ahead and threw it on, and it works great. And along with the bolts that I already had laying around here, I'm sure you can go to Home Depot. I'll find the right length and I'll put it in the description for you. I went ahead and threw a washer and a locking washer on there, so that way it would stay secure and no chance that the bolts would wiggle their way out of there. Well, guys, that's all I have for the video today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this build, feel free to hit me up at info@curlsontherack.com or leave your comment in the comments section. I don't plan on slowing down anytime soon. I will continue to be making stuff, so like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.